Hello everyone, this is Lala back with another video where I am talking about several different aspects of what I think makes or break a Big Brother Canada season, and today I'm going to be talking about the gameplay. Don't mind me if I'm slightly annoyed since I recorded an intro and I recorded the first season in discussion, but the mic ended up being muted, so I heard nothing. Anyways, what is determined as good gameplay or interesting gameplay is, of course, very subjective, and I think it's the most subjective of all the categories that I'm going to discuss. As some would say that an alliance of 3 or 4 are dominating everything from beginning to end, where the other 12 isn't doing jack shit, would be good gameplay, while there being 16 people in a season where they may not have the best gameplay, but they're all fighting very hard and they're all trying to create their own agency to thrive in the game, would be something else. So someone consider that better or worse. But it all depends on the person. Ultimately, for me, what makes a good season gameplay wise is pretty much everyone just trying their best to create their own path to win the season and to make get far in the season, and seeing several different types of gameplay as well, since I don't just want a season of competition beasts, or a season of floaters, or a season of coasters, or a season of people just trying to replicate one another, which makes for the cast and the season not very dynamic. So that is how I'm going to determine the seasons pertaining to gameplay, whether I have them high or low, and we're just going to get right to it. I'm still probably going to make a long video of Big Brother Canada seasons where I pretty much piece together the videos that I made discussing the categories and making it into a very long seasons cast, or not a seasons cast, a seasons review, which I didn't do intentionally at first because I thought it would be too long, but I might end up doing it after I discuss all of the categories. Anyways, let's just get on to the point of the video. So, at dead last at 10th on a gameplay perspective, in my opinion, is the cast of Big Brother Canada 11. With this category, it is definitely harder to choose, since some would say that a season with one alliance dominating is better gameplay, even if the rest of the cast isn't doing anything, while others would disagree. Some would say that a season where there is no dominating alliance is a better or a worse season pertaining gameplay for whatever reason that they deem fit. I have Big Brother Canada 11 the lowest when it comes to gameplay, due to me thinking that it encompasses the worst of all types of gameplay. Whether it's just someone just competing out, or a bunch of people not knowing what the F they're doing, or there not being much dynamicism in general. So there was a boys alliance that seemed like it was going to run things for a while, but due to jealousy, mainly Ty, making dumb decisions and the need to be in control, mainly Zach, but also Ty as well, that alliance falls apart. The Girly Pops alliance was a thing from the beginning, and people underestimated them, which is why they were left alone for a while, and I believe they're the most successful girls' alliance in North American Big Brother history. And the crown was formed around the time Zach was booted, which consisted of people like Kuzi, Anika, Daniel, those three were already in an alliance, Jonathan and Hope, who were kind of left in their own island after the Boys Alliance blew up. Ty and Zach really deterred the games and were brought to win home. So that's how the crown was formed. So that alliance was seemingly winning things for the next few weeks, but they kept on making dumb decision after dumb decision, which all came back to bite them once the loner Ty and the Girly Pops, which consisted of Renee, Claudia, and Shania, started winning a lot of those later competitions. Of course, there was a point in the season around the last third of the season where nothing really mattered, as Ty kept on winning damn near every competition, and the other Huskists ended up cowering in fear due to his competition wins, which led to him steamrolling the rest of the season. So we end up with this steamroll set by competition wins and a bunch of alliances who make poor choices, which border on frustrating instead of entertaining more times than not. And it also doesn't help that we didn't have feeds to get extra context as to what was happening, as the digital dailies didn't tell us too much. And from what the cast stated afterwards, I don't think we missed too much pertaining their commentary post-season about the season and things that we missed. So at 9th is Big Brother Canada 7 pertaining to gameplay. a part of me was going to put this a bit higher, since it does have the Pretty Boys, which is one of the strongest alliances in Big Brother history, not just Canada, but I really cannot ignore the rest of the cast, and due to that, I really wanted to put the season as dead last pertaining this category. But clearly, I decided not to do that. Adam had a preseason plan of making a four-member guys alliance to pretty much replicate the brigade from Big Brother 12, and he executed it on the first day by recruiting Dane, Anthony, and Mark into the alliance and winning the first HOH. They were of course able to pick everyone else off throughout the season, but there are more intricacies that I have to talk about. Dane pretty much had Estefania, Damien, and Kiara as numbers. Adam had Samantha, Chelsea, and Kyra, the latter later on, and Anthony had Corey as his number, though he had decent relationships with a lot of people in the house. The first half of the season was pretty much everyone against Samantha and somewhat Adam, or at least according to the people who weren't in the Pretty Boys alliance, and it was really irritating seeing the women refuse to even attempt to see that there was a guys alliance, hence all the women going home early and then just ignoring that facet, letting stupid penniless make this season boring as hell. Even when the Pretty Boys started infighting, especially throughout the second half of the season, you can never get invested because nothing was going to change gameplay wise. So when Adam used his power to send Corey home, despite Anthony outplaying Dane and Anthony by getting Mark to do what he wanted, it really didn't leave much intrigue, and stuff like that you just really didn't care much for. And the other house guests that were not in the alliance but made it past the halfway point, like a Corey, Kira, Estefania, or Damien, didn't even really care to play the game and were beyond clueless, which just made the season even worse on this front. There was no power shift, there was no intrigue throughout this season, even when the final five causes the Pretty Boys to turn on one another. The stakes just didn't matter to me at that point, despite it being one of the more interesting weeks of the season, gameplay wise, since Dane was able to convince Anthony to keep him when Anthony should have booted him. And the other castmates are too strategically inept for me to even care or consider putting this cast higher in this category. So at 8, I have Big Brother Canada 1. A part of me was thinking about putting the season quite a bit higher pertaining to the gameplay of the season, but when you really get to the core of it, the season was a steamroll from the very beginning to the very end, and there really isn't much to talk about when it comes to the gameplay. There was the Quattro Alliance that was seemingly running things for the first few weeks of the season, as Emmett, Tom, Alec, and Peter seemingly had a lot of control and power throughout the house, as they had a lot of power, and two or three of them at least had a lot of relationships to have their influence spread. And I'm not included Tom in those three. Ultimately, Tom became too much of a liability, so the house turned on him, and this gave Emmett a chance to pivot into working with what would become the East Coast Alliance with Jillian, Andrew, and Tala. They dominated the rest of the season, and what's even more frustrating is that Peter and Alec had many opportunities to create a path for themselves to have true agency, with people like Topaz, Gary, AJ, and I'm pretty sure a few others, and they completely blew it since they were so obsessed with Emmett's approval, and they ignored a lot of Topaz and even Gary's advice, especially when it was good advice that they very much needed to follow. And what makes it even worse is that Gary came back into the end game, almost won the season, and then Jillian won due to an accidental vote. Gameplay wise, the season is just a complete bore fest, and the fact that this section is a lot shorter than the other seasons just shows that there's not much to the season gameplay wise, and it's warranted in me putting it this low. So at 7th place, I have Big Brother Canada 2. I don't know if this placement will shock a lot of people, and it somewhat shocked me, but it makes a lot of sense when you think about it. In general, the season is really just two steamrolls split into halves, as the first 4 weeks of the season was the domination of the first 5 alliances, which consisted of Sabrina, Sarah, Andrew, Kenny, and Arlie, as they made the alliance before anyone else entered the house, and really had the connections throughout the house to run things. There was the Unstable Girls Alliance in the beginning of the season, with the likes of Rochelle, Aika, Netta, Sarah, and Sabrina, with the latter two playing double agent, if I remember correctly. But they made infuriating move after infuriating move, and they in general just were not likable. And the first five were also not the most likable either, but they were mainly able to control things by setting Sabrina up to be a mole. The second half of the season is then run by the Sloppy Seconds Alliance, which includes people like John, Netta, Heather, Arlie, and Adele, and even Allison for about 2 weeks, if I remember correctly. And I do like coups in Big Brother, but this one was not earned and it was extremely artificial. Canada's HOH had to do what the House would not do in nominating two members of the first five alliance, and many of them stated in the diary room that they wouldn't have taken the shot that Canada took during that week, which further proves my point. And due to the knowledge of who is and is not liked by Canada, I do think that affected the season in how people aligned with one another afterwards, as they knew some people were not liked by Canada and others were. So they wanted to be with the people that were liked, especially if there's a twist that came into the game. John and Netta did make some impressive moves throughout the second half of the season, especially with how they handled the early boot week, but the others in the alliance were so blind to what was happening and what they needed to do, especially the likes of Heather and Adele. Overall, there's not a whole lot happening in the gameplay of the season, and some of the changes were just very unnatural, hence its relatively low placement here. And it doesn't have the most dynamicism regarding the gameplay. So, ending the bottom half of this ranking at 6 is Big Brother Canada 3. I'm going back and forth about this cast when it comes to the gameplay. This cast had the most super fans in any season ever regarding North American Big Brother, if I remember correctly, and they all wanted to play the game very hard. I remember watching the feeds when they turned on, and the entire house had so many alliances, whether they were in large groups, small groups, duos, and trios, where half of them didn't even make it onto the episodes pertaining the alliances that were formed. There was the Chop Shop Alliance, which only Willow, Greg, Bobby, and kind of Bruno took seriously, where Godfrey was a subsidiary of that group. A majority of the women plus Johnny were in a group, and I think it was all the women but Ashley, Pilar, and Willow, if I remember correctly. But that group lost some numbers earlier on in the season to the point where it was mainly just Sarah and Brittany. Jordan and Zach were in the middle of the house, with Zach having more relations on one side and Jordan having more relations on the other side, where they controlled a lot of the first half. Ultimately, a lot of moves were prevented or halted altogether due to the weekly twists that were thrown into the season, and it got very frustrating to watch after a while. There was also the game flipping on Jordan and Zach during the latter's HOH week, though a twist caused that to happen, and that twist being Cindy's return and her returning after nominations were already done. And it really was the Diaper Alliance winning out over the next few weeks after that, where they would have dominated the season, but a bunch of twists came into play, especially the coup d'etat. It just got really frustrating. While there are definitely some great moments gameplay wise, I really think it could have been an all star or all tier gameplay cast if they just left things alone, where a lot of interesting things could have happened. So, as we have seen in Canada and US, with twists, they often make the gameplay of those seasons more boring and ruins whatever positive momentum was happening. Unfortunately, we have a few decent moments, but the gameplay is just disappointing in general, especially since there are fans, and they know how to handle the twists by playing around them. I also think that due to them being so many fans and them generally being lower personality in general, a lot of them knew how to lay under the radar. Though they wanted to play aggressively and knew what moves needed to be made, they knew that taking the quieter approach more often than not, especially with the twists, was the way to go, which led to a lot of disappointment pertaining the gameplay. At number 5, at the halfway point pertaining to gameplay, is Big Brother Canada 4. What is funny about this cast is that they're known as some of the weakest gameplay wise, and I do agree that for the most part. Though I do prefer the gameplay of this season compared to a lot of the others, clearly. One of the main reasons is that throughout the entire season, I believe this season is the first in my recollection that has three sides of the house, which remained throughout the entire season. One side of the house included Maddie, Dallas, and Ramsey, with Lavita and Sherry kind of being a part of them, and this took place during the first week, with Lavita winning HOH, and them all being blindsided over the page vote, which ends up happening with the third week, once again with Christine getting booted. This side of the house is consistently making dumb moves, like Levita's two HOHs, Maddie deciding to target Levita on her HOH, Dallas pretty much asking to go on the block, Maddie and Ramsey blowing up their truce with Jared and Kelsey, so on and so forth. The other side of the house is the third wheel alliance with Kelsey, Jared, and Ro, who were an unbreakable trio throughout the season, but they also had other relationships with people like Cassandra, Mitch, and the BBCAN brothers. I do think that a lot of the social connections came to pretty white privilege, especially with Jared and Kelsey, but they did have some decent ideas and ran their HOHs decently. But their entitlement definitely caused a lot of interesting things to happen and a lot of infuriating things to happen as well, which also benefited from the twist, mainly the Mitch boot, where it wasn't even the smartest thing for them to take out Mitch during that week. And especially for Raul's part, and even Jared was getting closer to Mitchell before Kelsey came back, so I don't think that was the best move for them. And then, of course, there was the middle alliance of floaters, which consists of Cassandra, the BBCAN brothers, Mitchell, Joel, and Tim, where they were really the ones controlling the vote throughout the first several weeks of the season, and really pitted the two other alliances against one another. There was going to be a civil war that broke up the Middle Alliance, and new sides were being aligned due to the Dallas versus Maddie vote. Until the mid-season twist came in, and Kelsey coming back, ruining that building dynamic and kept things the same for much longer than it would have. While the gameplay was not the strongest, the dynamics for the first two-thirds of the season was interesting and unique, though when the Pack brothers and Kelsey eventually got together during the last third of the season, it really made the season a lot less interesting from a gameplay point of view. At fourth is Big Brother Canada 9. So this cast is known as being one of the weakest when it comes to the gameplay capability, but some of the most interesting gameplay on a cast on a whole usually comes from people who are not the very best, and they don't have the template studied down to every detail as to what they should do. Of course, the team's format in the first 2 weeks of the season encouraged two sides to be formed, though it wasn't everyone on the same team in the same alliance, if that makes sense. The Sunsetters consisted of Latoya, Judson, Tishawn, Tina, Kiefer, and Beth. I believe that's it, and I don't think I'm missing anyone. And the other side that formed a week or so later mainly consisted of Rohan, Kyle, Austin, Brayden, Tara, and Victoria was kind of just added on. And those sides remained consistently throughout the season in some variations. A few stragglers were taken out in the first 2 weeks, which was heavily led by the Sunsetters, but then Victoria targeting Latoya caused a change in the house, as the other side realized that they needed to stick together. Unfortunately for them, Kiefer won the next HOH to boot Kyle, though they were still united, and Victoria wasted her invisible HOH to boot Austin, who was not a threat and wasn't coming after her, because I guess she wanted to work with Deshawn and Jetson, but that wasn't happening after she booted Latoya. Victoria became a lone wolf before her mid-season boot. Tara and Tina got closer to one another over anyone else throughout the season, and I believe they had an alliance with Kiefer from very early on in the season. And Brayden realized that he needed to get closer with people from the other side of the house, which is what we saw especially with Tishawn. The trio of Tishawn, Beth, and Jetson, with Kiefer being an ally, seemed like they were going to steamroll the season with their weird choices and their erraticness. Like them trying to backdoor Kiefer on Jetson's HOH, only to not go through with it after nominating him. And then there was the complete clusterfuck of the final 6 by everyone, which led to Jetson choosing to save Beth with the veto and getting blindsided. Things got a bit slower after that, though we did see the emotional cutting of Kiefer and Tishawn flirting with Brayden to get to the end. While the gameplay was not record-breaking or anything else, people were playing their asses off, even if they weren't doing the right moves, and that's what made it fun. At third is Big Brother Canada 5. It really isn't shocking that I have this season this high pertaining its gameplay. Usually, veteran versus newbie seasons are very stale, pertaining to the dynamics of the season, which affects the gameplay, of course, but despite the veterans agreeing to work together, they were still going at it by the end of week 1. Cassandra ended up being on the outs with the veterans, Netta got close with Bruno, Kevin, and Cindy, Gary was on the out as well, and was ready to turn on Cassandra due to a lie. Dallas was too busy doing his own thing, and Aika was in the middle. Who would have thought that choosing between the muscular newbies and Mark and Dimitri would cause so much trouble and drama? Anyways, the six aligned of Damaika, Cindy, Bruno, Kevin, and Netta started to form in the second week because Dimitri was HOH and had a lot of power throughout the pre-jury portion of the season. But everyone in their alliance was building allegiances with people that were not in their alliance, and they were building bonds with people on the other sides of the house. It was clear that Ika and Dimitri really wanted to work with the likes of Dre and William, and people like Netta, Bruno, and Kevin really wanted to work with the likes of Dylan, Emily, and Jackie. Of course, this led to the big alliance falling apart right when the jury portion of the season started in the double, and you had the rest of the veterans going at it for the rest of the season. What's very interesting to me is that all the newbies, but Dimitri, took advantage of the civil war, actually no, it was the outright war happening between the veterans, and had plans to boot all of them back to back to back to back. And it was going to work, though Dre got sloppy. I really like seeing the newbies take control of the game and to not let the vets steamroll them, which is something we really see in mixed seasons. Aika and Dimitri got themselves out of a few tight jams that are virtually impossible, and Kevin won his way out, which was honestly just kind of a boring way to end this season. There's so much interesting and intricate gameplay happening in the season, but Kevin kind of breaking the system with the competitions and how he studied for them is one of the reasons why I can't put it as high as the other two seasons in this category, where someone didn't have to comp out in the end. So the silver prize of second goes to Big Brother Canada 6. I'm going back and forth about whether the season should be first or second regarding the gameplay, but it is very close. We see in many other seasons of Big Brother Canada that the bedrooms tend to influence the alliances in the house, or at least the formation of alliances in the beginning of the season, and that isn't any more clear than in this season. There was the Red Room in the house, which consisted of people like Johnny, Ali, Olivia, Derek, Jesse, and Kayla, who did work together for a decent amount of the season, though it became looser and looser as the weeks went on. And the Right Room Alliance-ish consisted of people like Hamza, William, Paris, Maddie, Veronica, and some other people that I'm definitely forgetting about. Pretty much, the Red Room Alliance steamrolled the White Room Alliance at first, and despite there being an alliance with Paris, Jesse, Derek, and Kayla that formed in the beginning, that fell apart pretty quickly. Johnny had a lot of good relationships with everyone in the house, especially with people in the right room, and he was trying to target Derek and Kayla a lot earlier, as he was also the main reason why Jesse was targeted, since he convinced Hamza to target Jesse, and there was an interesting civil war with the Red Room that took several weeks to pan out, as many of the sectors and pairs within that group turned on one another and then made up with one another the next week, and it was just very interesting to watch. While the Civil War was building up, Erica wasted her HOHs on taking out people like Marin and Veronica, who wanted to work with her, and then we did see things change when Kayla won her first HOH, since she and Derek knew that they were huge targets, and Johnny needed to be handled. Erica was booted due to the stupid veto twist, causing there to be an extra week wasted on booting Ryan. Alejandra, Olivia, Kayla, and Derek were pretty much working together at this point, despite them having a fallout a few times throughout the season. But we had one of the greatest weeks ever with Alejandra and Kayla on the block, and the house went on fire, where Johnny really went scorched earth. Johnny and Kayla escaped some tight jams while they were targeted, being on the block during eviction night during the season, and it was very interesting. After the triple essentially wiping out in alliance, Derek was able to trick William into not saving his entire alliance, and Paris ended up beating out the unstoppable Shermans. There was so much in the game happening, which a lot of it didn't even make it onto the edit, and I couldn't even cover a bunch of it here, as everyone in the game was playing their asses off, which made the season's gameplay a lot more interesting and fun, but it just couldn't get to number 1. And the gold prize of first in the category of gameplay goes to Big Brother Canada 10. Before I started creating this list, I never really thought that this season would make it as number 1 regarding this category, though it really should have, and it makes a lot of sense now that I'm thinking about it. There was an 8% alliance that formed on the first week that was set to dominate the season. I don't really remember who is in it at the moment, and I don't even know if it was 8 people, but it was a very diverse alliance, and I think it involved Summer, Tanisha, Josh, Moose, Gino, Kyle, and some other people. Outsider Marty won HOH randomly, which ruined the majority's plan, and Jay was randomly booted there. Cal definitely decided to go all on out about the POC conspiracies. Remember, this was the very first season that took place after Big Brother 23, and Big Brother US is actually more watched in Canada than BB Canada, so the BB US house definitely knew about this. And he completely blew up the alliance and made a bunch of dumb choices, to the point where his other ally, Stephanie, was blindsided, and his best friend Gino sent him home the very next week on Gino's HOH. A duo named Kevin and Helena were waiting on the sidelines and in the shadows to make a move and to really direct the season, or to create the direction of the season to benefit them. And they had their shot when they saved Josh over. No, it wasn't Josh. I think it was Moose, actually, over Tanisha at the end of the pre jury as they were nominated together, if I remember correctly, and recruited Josh to be in their trio while gathering a bunch of outsiders in a bunch of alliances where they did use it to run the rest of the season. We had Gummy Bear Gate, which decided who went home on Money's fighting HOH, though I believe Kevin and Helena were already setting up Gina to go home within the last week up to that point already. And the very intense triple eviction where it was revealed how cutthroat and cold Josh really was to the jury, and he had to finally show his cards, which he had avoided all season up to this point. The final 5 round was very interesting, as Helena and Kevin was heavily considering booting Josh, and JC Lynn really fought hard to stay, which made it interesting. It seemed like Josh was really waking up, since he knew that Helena and Kevin were almost thinking about they almost sent him home, but he ended up screwing with the endgame, as he booted Betty and taking Kevin to the end, causing Kevin to win, and even keeping Kevin over Helena wasn't the smart move. While Kevin was an easy to predict winner, he did not dominate the competitions, but a lot of social work and manipulation to create his own path, and didn't get his way all the time. And there are so many other people who were playing the game hard here and had a lot of moments this season to make their mark on the strategy element. We saw a mastermind game without the others being complete sheep who did nothing in the game, unlike other seasons that had a mastermind. So that concludes my video on the Big Brother gameplay, not game players, gameplay tier rankings of the Big Brother Canada seasons. And this was definitely an interesting season to look at, since I had to really focus on the moments that happened and the dynamics within it, without delving into who I liked or who I disliked, or the entertainment factor of it. So I wanted to be more objective with this, so I can only be so objective. So there's definitely a few other categories that I'm going to delve into when it comes to the Big Brother Canada seasons. So some of these categories will include the drama that happened in these seasons, the twists, and of course, I have to consider the pacing of these seasons into consideration. So I'm going to most likely talk about the pre-jury of these seasons, the jury portion of these seasons, and the endgame portions of these seasons before I combine everything else. In addition to that, I should have the Big Brother Canada game player tier rankings video out sooner than later, and I'm definitely thinking about making some other Big Brother videos. And of course, I'm thinking about making other videos that aren't pertaining Big Brother. And then I have my BB20 compilation videos that are still in the works. So thank you all for supporting. My Twitter is Lala Ani. You can subscribe to the channel, you can like the videos, it really helps out, and I hope all is well with you all. Bye!